Without further ado, I'm going to throw right to our first speaker, who is to my right, is Stephan Berger, who is a senior cybersecurity analyst at InfoGuard and also a regular contributor to Swiss Cyberstorm. He is going to be speaking about giving us some insights into recent InfoGuard incidences that have occurred and letting us know what the 7 biggest security failures of companies are currently in the security environment in a talk called The 7 Deadly Sins. Exactly. Without further ado, let's welcome Stephan to the floor, everyone.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Headset? The headset? Oh, now it's working? Is it working? Yes, it's exactly. Okay, hello everybody. Thanks for attending my talk about the 7 deadly sins. Some misconfigurations and failures we see regularly in our incident response cases. So I have to be punctual on time. So let's just jump into the first sin. So the first sin we see, it's not like vetted or positioned in an order, all the sins, but this one is really on top from my priority list in our opinion. That's one is so frequently. So last year was Exchange, for example, was riddled with vulnerabilities. So everybody of you remember, I'm sure, the proxy logon, the proxy shell vulnerabilities, and we cannot stress this out. Then taking the Exchange vulnerability as an example, just reading these headlines, Exchange server were scanned within 5 minutes of news going public. So this is a crazy short amount of time from just dumping a new vulnerability on the net and reversing and exploitation or just weaponizing that talk. And here on that slide, the quality is bad. Maybe it's from a beamer, whatever. So this one here is from a real case we worked on. Just pay attention to the date times here. So we see here a screenshot from Rapid7. Rapid7 is the company who builds and maintains the famous Metasploit exploitation and attack framework. So given here, we are looking here at the proxy shell revert called execution. So what Rapid7 did, they ported the patch to Metasploit, giving them freely available to the community or to the whole world. So the patch here, or the vulnerability for a proxy shell, was disclosed in June 21. Metasploit weaponization or created a Metasploit module in August. So just starting from August, that exploit code was available for the whole world, for every script kiddie. Like for a 12-year-old kid or girl could just use Metasploit to attack Exchange servers. Now take a look here. We see that's from February 2022. So 6 months after releasing exploit code, we see in the wild an exploitation of an Exchange server. I mean, that's crazy. Just pay attention here. That's the subject with random characters in it. And given the fact this Exchange server was from a hospital. So, I mean, it's just not small companies which are not paying attention to patch updates or to exploit codes in the wild. This one is from a critical infrastructure here in Switzerland. Going back and going further inside, we see here from GitHub, exchange proxyshell.py. And pay attention to the circle here, or to the square here. Is self, random subject, random string, 16 characters. So it's exactly the same pattern we see here. So this mail draft was found in an inbox from a customer, and it's exactly the same pattern we see here in public exploit code in GitHub. So you as a customer, or you as a company, or you as an IT administrator for working for a company must be aware that public exploit code was dumped or is still dumped frequently onto the web. So it's not a big deal anymore to hack networks. It's so common practice this nowadays. So everybody can watch a YouTube video or YouTube tutorial how to break into networks. It's not like 20 years ago, which you have to be like an expert or a wizard in networks or in operating system internals that you really able to reach into a network. Another recent example is the newly published Fortinet vulnerability. I'm sure if you are attending the news or reading the news, you have heard about this vulnerability. Just pay attention to the time frame here. So we see from the 10th of October, this advisory was published by Fortinet But as a Fortinet customer, you've received early news about this vulnerability. So you had the chance to patch your system before the exploit was released, or the advisory was released by Fortinet. And now again, pay attention, please, because just 3 days later, public exploit code was published, or exploit code was published once again on GitHub. So this one is crazy as well. So as an attacker, they just need like 3 days or maybe less. If you're like in a ransomware operation or in a ransomware group, just this time frame is mind-boggling for me, because you as an IT administrator or as a security professional, you don't have much time to patch your systems. And we worked more than one case which companies patched their system too late, which led to an active exploitation of the Fortinet, which again could be used to enter your network if you don't patch your systems. So I cannot stress this enough, how important a patch update or really important patching is. I mean, the internet is flooded about security news, about hacking operations, about network breaches and whatever. What I tell to my customer is how to stay on top on the security news. One way is to follow like a public Twitter list called Cyber from Florian Roth. If you're just paying like 10 or 15 minutes per day on Twitter, you get a good grasp or a good feeling what's up in the cybersecurity space. I mean, that's really good invested time. Just take your coffee and take your time to read to the Twitter feed. That will give you some ideas what you have to prioritize in order to stay current and in order to patch your system and don't fall in that trap like most of our customers, which are patching too late, or they miss a patch, or sometimes customers are not even aware that they should patch, or that a patch was released, or that an active exploitation is going on. So to bring my point home, once again, this one here from Sophos Lab from June, and they're telling exactly the same. I'm stressing here is like proxy logon and proxy shell are 2 good examples how important patching is. If you don't patch, your network will get breached one way or another. So, and proxy logon is just one example of many vulnerabilities which are exploited in the wild. And we are not talking about like advanced persistent groups which are exploiting those vulnerabilities. This, like I said before, the exploit code is public, and every script kiddie on the whole wide world could use that code to enter your network or to exploit your network. A question I often ask my customers or my client is, do you have an emergency patch process in place? How fast can you implement a patch? Were you able to patch your system within 2 to 3 hours? Sometimes it's needed. Like the first slide I show you, the patch was released and within 5 minutes the scanning going on. So it's a whole frenzy when a new patch comes out. So the attackers, they take the patch, they binary diff the patch, and they weaponize the patch or the code. So you as a defender, you must be aware that the time frame is really, really small nowadays. So keep that please in mind. So the second sin is lack of multi-factor authentication. Every time. Mostly in every incident case we are working nowadays, it's multi-factor authentication which is missing at some point in another. Let me give you an example here. So what we are looking here is an excerpt from the Internet Crime Report, which was published by the FBI last year. So we see here that business email compromise, so an attacker which compromises in public or an email mailbox from a company, that the losses were nearly $2.4 billion, and that's only the amount the FBI is tracking. So just imagine how big that sum is just going worldwide or even in Switzerland. How or why is that such a problem? Because most of the time multi-factor authentication is missing. So we worked a lot of cases where customers have on-premise mailboxes, Exchange mailboxes, which were accessible from the internet without multi-factor authentication. We have customers which are using Exchange Online on Azure without multi-factor authentication, and it's really trivial to like hack or to compromise such mailboxes. Because why? Most of our users, or at least a huge amount of or a huge percent of the users are still falling inside the trap of phishing emails. So it's really, when I'm talking with our pen tester, just say like numbers from 5 to 20% sometimes on phishing campaigns. I mean, that's huge. And all it takes for the attacker to compromise a network is just one user who enters his credentials. Without multi-factor authentication, the network or the data or whatever is completely gone if you don't have monitoring systems in place, which we see in a coming slide. So how does the attackers bypass authentication or multi-factor authentication? The quality is really bad. I'm sorry for that. It should be better. So we are seeing here an approved sign-in request. So most of our customers, if they have multi-factor authentication, they use something like the Microsoft Authenticator. So I'm entering my password inside the form, and I press login, and suddenly on my mobile phone, this approve message here appears. And all I have to do is deny or approve. So is that safe in some way? Is it? I mean, it's better than nothing, but is it really safe? It depends, as always in information security. So this excerpt here is from a Lapsus chat. Lapsus was, or is still, I don't know, there was a famous ransomware group, and the chat was leaked from that group, and which gave us good insight and good intel how the group operated and which techniques they used. So we see here their internal chat. So somebody from the group asked, they must have some form of multi-factor authentication, right? And somebody replied, we said, yeah, sure, but just it's asking again and again and again to approve the prompt. Just be so persistent and call the employee 100 times at AM while he's trying to sleep, and he will more than likely accept it. I mean, that's not something we came up with, or that this story is so true. We saw it also in our cases. And then read here, once the employee accepts the initial call, you can access the multi-factor authentication portal and enroll another device. I mean, that's critical. Keep that in mind. Once an attacker breached or is in possession of a password of a user, and the user accepts those messages or the multi-factor authentication prompt from the authentication app, he can log into that account, and yes, I'm sorry, so sorry. Here should be visible that the attacker added a new device to the multi-factor authentication portal. So in a sense, the attacker can enter your network anytime he wants because he's in possession of the password and he enrolled a new device. So it's kind of game over. So a better way to harden multi-factor authentication is to use that number prompt here. So when the user just wants to log in, he had to enter the number in his multi-factor authentication app. So that's quite a better way to protect multi-factor authentication. But keep in mind, it's really important that you protect every access into your network with multi-factor authentication. Sometimes we have customers that say, yeah, our email portal is protected with multi-factor authentication, but they forget about the remote desktop access they maybe have in place somewhere, or they forget about their VPN, or some users are not enrolled with multi-factor authentication. So we see a whole line of problems going on here. And you as a security professional have to make sure that you get really hold of every problem and of every lag or of every loophole an attacker might slip through that whole multi-factor authentication process. So the same holds true for remote access, like Citrix Gateway is a common target as well for the attackers. We see it several and numerous times in our incident response cases. Going to the third sin, it's ignoring antivirus messaging. So if you're following along on Twitter, some security professionals are really hitting hard against antivirus products. They're telling, forget about antivirus, it's not worth the money, it's just a bunch of crap, it's slowing everything down. No, it's not true. I've worked more, couple of hundreds of cases, incident response cases, and in 99% of all the cases, I can guarantee you, the antivirus picked up one action or another of the attacker. True that, for sure. So please pay attention to your antivirus console. Most customers ask me, okay, antivirus cool and so, but I don't know how to interpret the messages, or I don't know which are really critical from those messages and which are don't. So I tell them, okay, that's a good question, Joe. Just pay attention to the antivirus event analysis cheat sheet by Florian Roth. Probably most of you heard that name. He's a common or really famous security researcher. So if you see something along the line of Cobalt Strike, Meter Breeder, Mimikatz, and probably also Trojan or so, that's really a critical alert, I can tell you that. I saw multiple customers which the AV produced an alert, like Mimikatz was found on a server, and they were not paying attention. But if you find Mimikatz on a server inside your network, that's really a sign of a problem, I can tell you that. And what you should do is you should pick up the phone and call an expert. Yeah, sure. No, I'm not kidding here. So this one is a really good example. This one was from a customer which were breached, and then in the long run was extorted. They stole the data, and the whole network was ransomed. But the network was protected from an external SOC. So what the SOC analyst did, he wrote to the customer, hey, yesterday we saw 5 AV alerts on a server. What we did was, or what was detected, that's the best one. We see here Mimikatz. Mimikatz, one of those, highly relevant, really critical alerts. And they said, yeah, probably, or normally Defender can cope with such a threat. All good? Then I said, the system is a domain controller. Please do a full scan and call it a day. Okay, is that good? No, of course it's not. If you should find Mimikatz somewhere in the future on your domain control, it would be really a good way, a good position or a good time to pick up the phone, really, and call an expert if you cannot handle the case by yourself. The same holds true for here. This is also from an actual case we work. We see Cobalt Strike here and Trojan somewhere, and the customer tell me, so yeah, but it was quarantined. So the AV just detected the threat. It was quarantined. Yeah, exactly. And then shoulder shrugging and call it a day. No, please keep in mind, if you find something, if you find critical alerts like Cobalt Strike or whatever on a computer or even on a network inside your internal network, that's critical. Please don't make that mistakes like most or a lot of our customers do. I could probably speak the whole day about this topic, Active Directory hardening. I love it. Most of our customers, again, do not pay that much attention, unfortunately, because with a little effort, you can really harden your environment really good. So one of the more common findings we see is like passwords in the group policy object. I mean, pay attention here. So we see a GPO name. It's called Allgemeine Client-Einstellung. So in Group XML, we see a username support with a clear text password. And looking at the domain administrator group, that user support is member of the domain administrator group. So he holds the highest privileges in a Windows environment. So just picture this as an unprivileged user. So it just needs one attacker who breach a client, or one user just open a malicious document, the computer gets infected, and the unprivileged attacker on the breached computer goes from an unprivileged user straight to domain administrator within 1 minute. So this one here, like to write down the passwords inside the GPO, that's not possible anymore since 10 years. So Microsoft stopped that feature almost 10 years ago, but we still find passwords in those GPOs. So maybe when you go tomorrow back to the office, it could be wise like to check those passwords and to check these GPOs if you have passwords in them. The same holds true for service accounts. So we see a ton of service accounts which are member of the domain administrator group. Why is that bad? Because there's a technique called Kerberos thing. So as an attacker, I can request a Kerberos ticket from a service account, and I can try to crack those hashes offline. So even if an unprivileged user, so it just needs one compromised user or one compromised workstation that I, as an attacker, can build my attack chain offline. So you as a defender, would you detect like just one Kerberos request going onto the domain controller stemming from a workstation for a service account? Probably not. That's not noisy, but that's stealthy, and keep that in mind. So most of the time, service account don't have to be domain administrated. That's just overly overrated and overprivileged. The next issue is no password change. Keep in mind, these are all screenshots from real networks we are looking here at. So we see administrator, Citrix MS, these all these accounts here are member of the domain administrator group. So the password was like changed 20 years ago. Just imagine the password quality. Yeah. Again, no tiering model. So we see here that when you as an administrator just log in to a computer, you leave your credentials along the way. Just keep that in mind. So it's such bad practice to use your domain administrator or to your administrator account to log in remotely or like with different protocols for remote login into like normal workstation or terminal service. You will leak your credentials along the way. So keep that in mind as well. Some food for thought with like fantastic Windows logon types and where to find credentials in them. Highly recommended reading. It's complicated, but it's not impossible to harden your network that you don't leak your credentials along the way. Yeah, exactly. It's the same issue I've said before. Does the AV really quarantine the malware? Just call it a day or do an in-depth analysis?
What was the chapter name?
It's no in-depth analysis after an incident. Okay. That's good. Okay. So we had like Fortinet had a vulnerability which allows an attacker to leak or to read out the passwords. This one was in 2018, and still up to this spring, like 2022, we saw or we worked cases where the attackers used the passwords which were leaked here. So what the customers did, they just patched their Fortinet systems, but they haven't changed the passwords because they were not aware about the criticality. So keep that in mind. Sometimes it's not enough to restage a firm or to restage a client. So if, just an example, if you have like a maldoc was executed by the client and the client or the computer gets infected, sometimes it's not enough just to restage the machine. The same holds true here. Is it really enough to patch your system? Probably not, because an attacker had enough time to leak your passwords or to read out your passwords. So what we are looking here is an example of a web shell which was placed on an Exchange web server. So the client called us and said, hey, my Exchange server was vulnerable at that time, but I patched it. I run an AV scan, a full scan, and the AV didn't pick up. So I said to him, yeah, that's the same problem here. Just because you patched your system and the AV haven't found something on the server, it doesn't mean you are not vulnerable. That's exactly the case for incident responder or a forensic specialist, because you as a client, you wouldn't probably find that file here. So again, just make yourself aware how deep or how critical could the exploitation be. So if you're working a case, just think about the next step. What could the attacker do, or what was he able to do? So for example, if you have like a breach terminal server, as an attacker, does the attacker like dump the memory? Does he probably scan your networks to find another credentials? Is it really enough just to change the password from one single user? Because the attacker probably found multiple other passwords inside your network shares. Just keep that in mind. Sometimes you have to broaden your analysis and not just focus on one single client or one single workstation. So the sixth sense is direct access to the internet. Most of our clients, they are connecting, or the servers were able to connect directly to the internet. Why is that bad? Because the client or the infected server can directly communicate with a command and control server. With the help of a proxy, you can filter on various categories like hacking and malicious outbound data botnets. And if you are paying attention to those proxy logs, you might find an infected client early in the time frame or in the attack life cycle. So keep that in mind. It should be really forbidden that your clients or server can really directly communicate to the internet to slow down attackers and also do various kind of threat hunting. What you're looking here at is the user agent from Bumblebee. So in the early stage of Bumblebee, it's a common loader for post or for early infections. We see that user agent here, and such a user agent coming or going out to the internet from your client should be really a warning sign that something is really not good inside your network. and also slow down the exfiltration. So if you are like blocking such platforms like Dropbox or Mega or Yandex, which are used by threat actors to exfiltrate your data, you can slow down an attacker, and the attacker must use other ways to exfiltrate the data, which gives you as a defender an opportunity to detect them. And also we worked on a case where the attacker have to fall back through DNS. So because the direct internet access was not possible anymore, they had to fall back to DNS, and the DNS communication, the DNS C2 communication, was picked up by another network monitoring solutions. So it's really a defense in depth we see here. So the last one, the seventh sin is no EDR, no SOC. I'm not telling this because I'm working for a SOC provider, because I really truly believe in that every company needs an EDR at some place or nowadays. Because not only like 24/7, a security operations center, but keep that in mind that, like I've told you before, we see sometimes attackers which are going through from the initial infection to the domain administrator account in 2 hours, or maybe in less than 2 hours. So there is really no time that, when you're just paying attention, okay, I will not look at the alerts like in 10 o'clock in the evening. So you really have to have 24/7 model to deal with that incident. So here we see an EDR detection which detects a bloodhound on the process name and also on the file name. And we worked more than one case which the attackers use bloodhound, and they were not aware that bloodhound, when you don't specify the file name, just drop the results on disk with date stamp underline bloodhound. So it gives the attacker away. Just keep that in mind. These are simple rules, but highly effective. Last but not least, we see the naming conventions, sharphound, bloodhound sometimes, but also generic machine learning, and also, so it's not clear here. So once again, to go back a few slides before, so it's not that clear anymore. So we really have to pay attention to the details, think about how could the attacker breach my network, and would it be possible for the attackers like to get more passwords and dump more hashes. So really pay attention to the details if you're working like cases for yourself. I'm running out of time. What I wanted to tell you is this one becomes my 8th sin, I'm sure, because keep in mind if you are like plan or transforming your environment to Azure, that Azure has multiple vulnerabilities and multiple attack paths you as a defender have to be aware of. Otherwise, the Azure compromise will become the new biggest sin. So please, I'm open for your questions. Thank you.